Good morning, Chicago. You're listening to Inspirational Perspective. I'm your host, Linal Harris, your very own life coach right here on WVON 1690 AM, the talk of Chicago. Inspirational Perspective on your radio is all about murdering mediocrity and living the best life possible. So as I ask you every Sunday morning, are you living the best life possible? And this is the place to be, to explore that possibility. Well, good Sunday morning, and welcome to another show on Inspirational Perspective. 7:09, and it's August 4th. Brand new month. This is my birthday month. How about that? What can I say? Always got to celebrate your birthday. And so with this being August, I always like to go after the topics that really move me. And what I decided, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do a series of topics. I did this last August, and I did this back when I was on Saturday evenings. So I know a lot of people didn't get a chance to hear this series. And it's I call it the series, The Four Pillars of Life. You remember that one, Emmanuel?
Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah. And so we had the four pillars of life. And the four pillars of life, if you don't know, if you're a new listener and you don't recall the four pillars of life, the first pillar is your health and well-being. The second pillar, and also the relationship you have with yourself, right? So self-love. And then the second pillar is relationship with others, right? So relationships are the second pillar. And then the third pillar is work and money. But typically I just say money. And then because work is how we get the money, work comes in. And the fourth pillar is purpose and spirituality. And so what I decided to do this month is actually to cover each of those topics again at length, though, this time. Because before, I only had an hour in the studio. As a matter of fact, I was looking at my notes from the self-love series I did last year. And I was like, man, this is short. Then I was like, oh, I only had 60 minutes back then. So we'll be able to dive in. We'll also be able to take some phone calls and some questions. And the way I'm doing this is, since it's my birthday month, I've also been exploring how my pillars are standing in these areas. So when it comes to self-love, health and well-being, I'm like, you know what? There's an opportunity for me to take it to the next level, right? We can always fall deeper in love with the person that we're with, if it's a spouse or a significant other, our children, our families, and with ourselves. And so I'll give you a perfect example of how I'm starting that already. As I walked into the studio, so the Divine Healing Hour, Brother James and Sister Caroline, they phenomenal show. I told them that when I walked into the studio, but they, phenomenal show this morning. And I said, you know what? Let me ask them. I've been, procrastinating on getting to the store because I've already told myself I wanted to get to the store, have a consultation based on my own health and taking it to the next level. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna do that this month. This is my birthday month. This is the month that I should be taking care of myself. And we're gonna get into what that looks like and how we think about taking care of ourselves. Because often, when it comes to a birthday, many of us, we're like, I'm gonna turn up. And turning up means putting poisons in our body, right? So we're like, man, I'm gonna have the best cigar I've ever had, or I'm gonna drink the best drink, and regardless if it's the best tobacco and the best alcohol, is poison. And so often when we're celebrating our life, we find we're actually poisoning ourselves. And I want us to begin to think about, why is that? Are we really acting out of self-love, or are we doing these things that are traditional, that are the polar opposite of what it really means to take care of oneself, right? They were talking about health this morning as well, and consuming meat and all these different things that put more poisons in the body and actually degrade the way that we feel. And then we have to ask ourselves, then, if this hurts my body, then why do I do it? Like, what has me, in some ways, habitually taking on the same behavior over and over and over again? And so I want to explore that this morning. And take a look at this whole notion of self-love. Now, you know what? There's one question I wanted to ask them from the Divine Healing Hour. And that's where you all get your stats. You know what? If one of you all can give me a phone call and tell me where you get your stats. And let me tell you the reason why. Because I've looked up the top 10 killers of the top 10 causes of death. And there's no, okay. So is the temp line, Patrick, is the temp line, sorry, so my producer is talking to me right now. So the temp line right now is 773-336-3458. So anybody who wants to call in today, the 591-1690 number is not working. Okay. So then if you want to call in today, write down this number, 773-336-3458. And then, of course, either of you, the wonderful host of the Divine Healing Hour, if you don't mind calling back, please do. Because I want to know where you all got your list, because one of the things they talk about on the list, do you listen to them when you're driving in?
No, I don't.
What do you listen to? I know it's some good music. You listen to good music.
Sometimes I'm listening to gospel music. This morning I didn't listen to anything. I was just writing.
You're just kind of in your space.
Yes, I am.
Okay, awesome. That's good too. Mm-hmm. I listen to them when I'm riding in, and so they share they share the top 10 all the time. And one of the things they say number 3 is I don't know if they say, is it medical malpractice, right?
Wow.
One of in terms of the leading causes of death. Now, when you go to the CDC's website, they don't say that. And of course they wouldn't. Right? I mean, of course they wouldn't. That's why I was like, what you all get your list? Because I believe their list is actually the most accurate list. But what the CDC says is, well, let me back up a little bit. And I'm going to go into it. Maybe they'll call, maybe they won't. But here's what I want to do. I'm having a show titled, What is Self-Love and Do You Have It? Right? And right off the top, I believe there's a lot of people out there who are likely saying to themselves, Linal, I have self-love. Now, when you think about self-love, Emmanuel, would you say you love yourself?
I would say sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes?
Sometimes.
What do you mean by sometimes? Like, so you recognize that sometimes you're not, you take on behavior that's not loving towards yourself. I'm guessing you.
Yeah, so like sometimes like I know I need to wake up at a certain time, but I'm still going to sleep late doing things I shouldn't do or something like that.
That's a phenomenal example.
Yeah.
That's a great example.
So in that way, but then in some ways, I make sure I'm eating right and I do get rest, but like I said, it's not always.
But it's not always
consistent.
Yeah. Okay. Patrick, what about you, man? So Patrick's our producer. What about you, man? When it comes to self-love, what would you say? Like, do you?
Can you define that a little bit more for me?
Define self-love. Right now, so you getting ahead of me, Patrick. See, Patrick, you getting too smart, brother. Just how you see self-love. Do you say that you love yourself the way you should?
It's funny because when you explained it, I saw it more as like moments that you spoil yourself. So like you saying, stay up late.
Yeah.
It's like that's your personal time. So is that a moment of like you loving yourself because you're spoiling yourself, or is self-love like discipline moments that you should be trying to do?
Got it. Okay, you guys just heard the studio phone ring because he's on the other side of the glass.
That was a good point.
That was a good point. I don't always love myself the way I should. And I've seen the level of love that I show myself increase over time as I put my focus there. Right? So the question to the listeners today is, do you, like when you think about self-love, do you have it? And if you have it, because I think there's people we see where you're like, man, there's a complete lack of self-love, right? And then if you do have it, to what extent? To what extent do you have it? And I'm going to define self-love. So Patrick, keep listening. I'm going to define what self-love is. But I want to create the case first and foremost, because this is why I brought up this top 10. Because you might say, you might say to yourself, I love myself. I love myself and I take care of myself. But then when I look at the top 10 causes of death in the U.S., it says it's a very different picture. Because, and let me give you an example. So, 75% of all deaths in the United States are attributed to these 10 causes. With the top three of what I'm about to share with you accounting for over 50% of all deaths. And the top three are preventable. They're preventable if you have the knowledge, if you're willing to take on the practices that they talk about at 6 o'clock. Oh, Dr. Mason's on the line. Okay, I gotta let him on. And then, hey, who's that? Who's the top call? But if you look at these are preventable. And if they're preventable, then you have to ask yourself, like the majority of us are not loving ourselves. And because we're not loving ourselves, then unfortunately, we have these type of chronic diseases that are really taking over. But Dr. Mason, good morning. How are you?
Mr. Harris, how you feeling this morning?
I'm good. I got Caroline on the other line too. I'm gonna let her on in a moment. But how you doing? Thank you for calling in.
Yeah, I was on my way to church, so I heard what you were talking about. And the reference to the number 3 cause of death was an article published in the British Medical Journal listing that medical errors, not necessarily malpractice, but
medical errors
was the 3rd leading cause of death in America. So it doesn't mean there was an intentionality behind it, but it's just medical errors. Could be a drug reaction, could be
got it.
It could be wrong medication given, could be, and it's one of the major things at hospitals. Everyone's trying to reduce as much as possible, which is why we go through this double. People used to get the wrong medications or the wrong type surgery or those kinds of things, or adverse reactions to medication, and or sometimes there is negligence. So that is one of the leading causes of death. But if I might just take another 30 seconds,
Yeah, please.
I would say if you look at the top 10 causes of death, and Michael Greger wrote a great book called How Not to Die. And what he did in that book was to list those top 10 causes of death and others to talk about how you don't have to die from those things. And the major cause, if I were to just put it simply, the major cause of death in America from what we call the top 10 causes of death is really what we eat.
Yeah.
Because we call it all these different things, but it really isn't. At the level of causation, it comes back to food. And so when we eat these foods that contain large amounts of saturated fats, like you find in most all animal-based products, including dairy and milk, which is not necessary to eat at all.
Yep.
These are the real causes. So I don't want to go off on that because I do enough of it on my own show, but I did want to at least
I appreciate
that
it.
perspective.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And so those of you who don't know, I believe most of the listeners do know, Dr. Mason is also a host here on WVON. So tell us about your show real quick, what time you come on, and how people can listen.
Yeah, well, I'm on every Sunday, beyond this Sunday at 10 a.m. on WVON, the Doctor in the House. This is my 27th year.
27
on
years.
The show.
Wow.
27 years.
Yeah.
And this Sunday is the first Sunday, so it will be our Cancer Sunday. And
Got it.
even cancer, 30%, over 30% of the cancers that we have are diet-related.
You said it.
Cigarette smoking aggravates almost all of the cancers that you can imagine. Bladder cancer, lung cancer, these are all cancers that are related, many cancers related to cigarette smoking.
Wow. And how would you relate this? How would you relate this to self-love? And Caroline, please don't hang up. I'm coming to you next. How would you relate all of this to self-love? Because you and I, we've had some conversations, and you've shared, some of your personal opinion, and also you've taken action because you're like, wait a second, man, people aren't caring for themselves. Why am I doing this, etc. So, what is your opinion on self-love and why some of this is happening to us?
Well, I'll tell you really quickly. First of all, you got to know who yourself is.
Yeah.
Okay, you got to know self, and so you can love self. You got to know who that is, and that's not just the person that reflects back to you when you look in the mirror. That's a body, a mind, a soul, a spirit.
Yes.
And so what that means then is that if you really do love that self, you will do as few things to harm that self, intentionally or unintentionally, as possible. That you would try to put that self in both the best mental, physical, and spiritual position to be able to allow that self to blossom and be a wonderful human being that God intended to be.
Got it. Well, man, I appreciate you calling in. I know you're trying to get to that 7:30 service, so I'm not going to hold you.
I'm good.
Okay, but I definitely appreciate you. And how about this? Let me talk about manifestation. So I was thinking to myself as I was putting the show together. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna bring Carolyn on the line right now. Have you met Carolyn and Brother James from the Divine Healing Hour, Dr. Mason?
No, I don't think I met him personally. At least if I have, I don't remember.
Okay, well I'm bringing her on right now. Good morning, Carolyn. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Now, you're not the Caroline from the Divine Healing Hour, are you?
I am not.
Yeah, you got the same name though. Okay, so you know what? I'm gonna put you back on hold. I'm gonna take your call in a second. I thought you were her. I apologize.
Okay.
I'm gonna put you on hold
No problem.
and finish up with Dr. Mason here. I heard the voice and I was like, that's not her. But the reason I brought them up, Dr. Mason, is because they talk about this more from a herbal perspective, but they talk about self-love. I mean, their show is about self-love. And what I was saying is, I was thinking to myself when I was putting the show together, I made the decision that, that's what I was going to talk about this month on Wednesday. It'd be cool to have Dr. Mason on. And then you called in. So thank you. Thank you. The power of manifestation and just kind of bringing things toward you, right? So, when I saw the name, I said, oh man, you gotta be kidding me. This is wonderful. So I appreciate your comments. Anything else you'd like to say? But before
on the thing about self-love, we've got to understand that we live in a society that has us motivated to show love in all different types of ways that have nothing to do with love.
Yeah.
For example, we have a series of Hallmark days.
Yeah.
Where we show love by giving a certain kind of jewel, or we show love by the value of something that we
Right.
or
Right.
being able to sit down and have a conversation, or as I'm doing with a lot of my friends, you know, we just get together and just talk. And some of us don't even do that with our own families or
That's true.
with our own children.
That's true. That's true.
So the self-love starts with understanding who you are. And as you may or may not know, I spent a lot of time in the Nation of Islam as a young child. And so understanding who self is.
Got it. Yeah.
A lot of times we don't know self, and we've taken on these definitions of how to improve self, but that's not the self that really needs the improvement. The self that we're talking about is not loved just by what we do externally to ourselves. Yes, it's nice to wear nice clothes. Yes, it's to wear nice shoes, but we put an extrinsic value on these material things that we think transfer to ourselves to have value when they in fact do not.
They
And
don't.
we don't spend the time to embellish who we are as a person by looking inwardly and trying to understand what's God's purpose for our life and walking and living in that purpose. That is the way that we express the love, not only for ourselves, but for God, who is at the end of the day our ultimate creator. So we need to do those things that help self. And helping self isn't selfish. Helping self is to help others as well. And
That's right.
Look at them as we would look at ourselves. Love your neighbor as you would love yourself. You don't love yourself, then you won't love your neighbor. So those activities, whether they're drinking, things that harm us, drinking, smoking, not putting the kinds of things physically in our body, not allowing the right kinds of thoughts, not being around the right kinds of spirits, people that can bring you up or bring you down.
Wow, say that again.
But
Yeah, some relationships aren't loving. And so part of loving myself is knowing who to be in relationship with.
Well, if you love yourself, you won't let anybody else destroy or keep you from doing what you need to do for yourself. It doesn't mean you go out and spend your last $10 on buying something for yourself. No, you don't. Self-love has little to do with what goes on extrinsically, but everything to do with what goes on intrinsically.
Yes.
So I appreciate your shows enough because you bring forth these kinds of opportunities to talk about and explore what that really means. Because most people, because we live in such a materialistic society, one that puts so much emphasis on externalities that have absolutely no value. Because we as a people, and I'll say this in style, we as a people, because of our history in this country, have been bereft of a knowledge of who we really are.
Yes.
Whose we really are.
Yes.
And so we don't understand that the value that we have is greater than any value that you can have if you just look at ourselves and look at not the history that we've been taught, but much of the history that we have to learn about our descendancy from where we come from and what we've done. We are not the slaves that we've been telling ourselves. Our history does not start with slavery. Our history is richer than that. We are among the richest people on the planet. Now, yes, we have a way to go to get back to that point, but in our DNA, that still lives.
Woo! Well, thank you, Dr. Mason. Man, I appreciate you. We are aligned, brother. And I think you know that. I mean, I think that's yeah, we're aligned. Everything you said is what I say on this show. And it's just lovely to hear it coming from someone else. In particular, you. So Dr. Terry Mason, thank you so much. Hey, make sure you guys listen in to A Doctor's in the House at 10 a.m. with Dr. Terry Mason. Thank you for blessing us a little bit earlier this morning.
You're so welcome. And you keep up the great work. Now, your work on trying to reintroduce us to ourselves by taking us to the places from which we come and exposing us to who we are and what our real roots are is critical to understanding that self.
Got it. Well, thank you for that. And what was the name of that? You said it's the British.
I'm sorry?
The list that number 3 came in as
the British Medical Journal, and if you look it up, when I get there, if you're still there, we'll look it up and I'll show it to you.
Okay.
But
Awesome.
I use it in my talks all the time about the number 3 cause of death.
Got it.
Is medical errors. But the number 1 cause of death we still call heart disease. And that's really not what it is. The
Got it.
real issue is what we're eating that's putting stuff in our blood that clogs our arteries to our heart, clogs our arteries to our brain, clogs our arteries to our legs.
Uh-huh.
We call them different diseases, but they're all the same.
Which is basically not eating the right thing.
Which is basically not eating the right thing.
Got it. All right. Appreciate you, Dr. Mason.
And the right thing is eating more stuff that comes out of the ground as opposed to walks on it, flies over it, or swims in it.
Amen to that. All right. Well, thank you.
All right?
Okay.
Have a blessed day.
You too. You too. All right, man. That was, wow. Amazing. Amazing from Dr. Mason. Man, let me tell you something. So I was thinking to myself how cool it would be to have him on. I know he gets up and goes to church before he does his show. But how cool it would be to have him on in this conversation on health and well-being and self-love. And then there you go. He called in. So I really appreciate that phone call. A wealth of knowledge there in terms of health and well-being. And we heard it from him that the leading cause, you know, he just put it out there. The leading cause is, you can say it's heart disease, you can say it's cancer, you can say it's any of these things, but the leading cause is not eating the right thing. All right, so let's go back. So I talked about that in terms of self-love, because what I wanted to do is catch your attention. And here's why. I can recall when I was going through my coach training, my certification for becoming an ontological coach, okay? And the master coach was in conversation, so there was a cohort of us all being trained at the same time. And the master coach basically, in a conversation about self-love, asserted to me, pointed to me and said, as much as you think you love yourself, you don't love yourself the way you should. All right. Now this is what, 7 years ago. And I remember that when she said that to me, this master coach said that to me, I got upset. I was like, man, she don't know what she's talking about. You don't know me. You just met me. How you gonna tell me I don't love myself? Right? And then I kept going through the course. I graduated from the course, and all these years later, I look back at that guy, and I'm like, man, he didn't love himself. he did not love himself the way he should. Now, some of the things that Dr. Mason talked about in terms of being aware of who you are, I was aware of who I was, but I was still growing. Many of us are still growing. And that is one of the reasons why I want to have this conversation. Now, I got a few phone calls, so before I get into the meat and potatoes of what I want to share with you all, which is talking about self-love, and then looking at how we love ourselves. It's not going to be all about diet, I promise, but that's one aspect of it, okay? So if you find yourself addicted to certain foods that you say, oh, I just got to have it, consider that that's one of the ways that you are not adequately caring for yourself and loving yourself. That's just one of the ways. We're gonna look at other ways that we do this. Dr. Mason brought in relationship. That's another way where we're in toxic relationships with people who are not helping us, who are not leading us towards our purpose. That's another way. I'm gonna take these phone calls, and then we're gonna dive into this conversation about health love and how it links to self-love, and how it links to our health, and how it links to our well-being, and really living a life with vitality and vibrance the way that I know many of us intend to. But Caroline, good morning. Thank you for holding. You're wonderful. Thank you for holding. You wanted to make a comment about self-love.
Yes. I just wanted to add that, the question was, do we have self-love? And I believe that I do. I do because I practice it, and it all comes out as a result of my ability and results. I believe it's the positive energy and impact that I share with others, and that shows me, and it uplifts me, and it gives me the type of positivity that assures me that, hey, I'm practicing it, and because it's ongoing, it's something that I'm leaving a legacy. I'm providing others with it. So it's a constant, ongoing act of positivity.
Got it.
Whether it's giving suppers to people in the community or just hugging people or sending a positive text message.
Got it. So Caroline, what's one of your top ways that you show yourself, Caroline, some love?
Well, every Sunday at 7 a.m. I listen to one of the most awesome coaches. I listened
That's a good
about
answer.
maybe 2 months ago, and I actually have written a thesis on hidden trauma, the positive effects of silence, and I was studying, self-care and self-love. It was a part of my study where I was trying to advocate and teach women to basically do this, and it was the series of self-identity had just began, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So like one of my ways of practicing self-love personally is being mentored and being coached by people like yourself. And so this is my Sunday church every Sunday.
Wonderful. Phenomenal answer. Manuel and I, you can't see us, but we were laughing in the studio like, can't say nothing about that. That's a phenomenal answer. And thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. And I'm happy that, this has had an impact on you. You're writing a thesis, so it sounds like you're in school.
No, it's completed.
It's completed. So are you a doctor now?
It's completed. No, I am not. I've earned my master's.
Oh, it's master's. Okay.
University.
Okay, got it. So it's a thesis for your master's. Awesome.
Yes, but within the study, I was studying Black women.
Okay.
And we were kind of touching on the root of their hidden trauma, and we were trying to figure out. So one of the healing methods, because oftentimes we do cope in our process where we are drinking and smoking and partying and that nature. But what are healing methods? And some of the one of the healing methods is self-care.
Nice. So when we look at trauma, that's one of the things I talked about at length in the identity series, the trauma that many of us have undergone as African Americans. And what you're saying is, according to your thesis, I want to make sure I heard this right, that self-care and self-love, I'm throwing that in, is one of the ways that we can begin to heal the trauma.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. And I think that that's actually the number one method of healing, of actually moving forward in your process. And the reason why I believe that I practice and I'm assured that, I share self-care and love with others is because of the healing that I've endured. And without loving myself, I cannot love anyone else. And so absolutely, that is the number one thing the number one healing method that I offer and kind of educate. This is what we have to do in order to get to another level.
Got it. Caroline, thank you so much. That was a phenomenal phone call, and thank you for listening. And please call in again in the future.
All right, you have a great morning.
All right, you too.
Continue to listen.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. All right, great phone call. All right, Chris. Good morning. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. You know what? This is a very interesting conversation because, I think a lot of us equate, we are happy, we do love ourselves, but then with outside influences telling us what we should be doing, that gives us it tells us that we're not loving ourselves. So, I'm living my best life, right? But then society tells me, oh, your best life is to go get a college degree. Your best life is to get up and exercise. Your best life is to do X, Y, Z. Then I'm actually putting, it's a stress that actually becomes a part of my daily life because I'm trying to do the things that society
creates attention.
be doing to have to live my best life.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So,
Oh no, I see exactly. As a matter of fact, I was having this conversation. I think it was Friday with Daryl, who's a listener, and we were talking about. I think it was him. I think it was him. But what we were talking about was how commercials, like for instance, it wasn't Friday, it was actually before that, it was Wednesday. But how commercials, like for instance, these pizza commercials, they'll say more cheese. Like we have the most cheese, more cheese on our pizza, right? And so this input is telling us like, oh, the way to love yourself is to get this pizza with more cheese than the other pizza.
Right.
More cheese ain't good.
No, more cheese, no. But
Yeah.
But then, we take it to, okay, my father passed away a while back, right?
Okay.
And he was a diabetic. He was a diabetic. He didn't know he had diabetes until later point in his life.
Mm-hmm.
He was so stressed out trying to change his diet according to what someone else said, because they said, oh, you have these issues, that he felt in his heart, he felt, you know what, I'm not even happy trying to do these things that the doctor is telling me to do. So I'm not even living up to how I want to live. And it was just stressing him out every single day. And so, so then the outside world is telling him what he should be doing based on living. And who is to say that just because we have these health, the number 10 causes of death, that if we do those things, we're not loving ourselves. That's just saying that that's the cause of death. Death has zero things to do with loving yourself, unless you come from the perspective as a health fanatic, where you tell someone else what they should be doing with their health.
I disagree with you on that. And here's why. Because many of us have a purpose that is cut short because of a lack of self-love in terms of, and knowledge, by the way, in terms of how we take care of ourselves. And there's one of the reasons why we eat the way we eat, and we get the disease. I don't know if you heard Dr. Mason on the line, and we get the diseases that we get is because of our diets. And one of the reasons we have these diets is based on social society standards, which you talked about.
Right, he said 30% of all cancers caused by eating.
Yeah, and then, do you hear what he said about heart disease?
Yeah.
Where he said, you can say heart disease is a leading cause of death, but the reason people get heart disease is because of what they eat. So really the leading cause of death is what people eat.
Right, and what percentage you said, what percentage is that?
Well, what we do know is the top 3 causes of death make up 50% of all deaths.
Okay, so then when you look at the other 50% of people who have these issues that they still may die, right? Are they living their best life? So it's a genetic component that comes to this, right? It's a genetic component that comes to this. So some people cannot eat just like other people can't eat. So just because a person has a genetic component that will pretty much save them from bad diets.
But there's research that says that, for instance, your father, he had diabetes.
Right.
But you can actually change your genetic genome by how you begin eating and how you take care of yourself so you don't pass that on to your children.
But what if that's not important to me? See what I'm saying?
And what I'm saying on the show, that's a great question. And what I'm saying is, if it's not important to you, then it's likely that you lack the level of self-awareness and love that you should have.
But I agree with you, because I'm a health fanatic. I'm a health fanatic.
Okay.
But this is the thing, though. I'm telling someone else. I'm getting input from someone else saying what I should be doing.
Well, and typically that's where it starts. Here's the difference.
Yeah.
So I can already tell that you're open to what I'm saying.
I'm very open, yes.
Right.
I'm very open.
Now, someone else is listening, and they're likely not, because there are thousands of listeners right now.
Right.
So, someone else right now might be shaking their head saying, I don't got time for this guy. Right? So what's going to happen, because truth is truth. Truth is truth. And so what happens is, and so are the inputs that we bring in, like you talked about, they create a tension.
Yeah.
Some of this tension is healthy, some of it is unhealthy.
Right.
So a person listening to me who's struggling with what I'm saying, I would call that a healthy tension. Why? Because the source of my words are coming from a place of love, healing, and really my purpose to help all of us live our best lives, right? So if they're struggling with what I'm saying, that's creating a healthy tension in their lives. It should create some stress and tension because I want them to think twice before they put that burger to their mouth. I want there to be some tension when they do it. If they're listening to me, okay? Then you have another tension, which you and I experience because you say you're a healthy guy. And that tension is we're driving around, I'm hungry, and I want to eat, but there's nothing to eat that I can eat that's healthy. Right? That's another tension, right? That tension is based on the commitment that you and I have to our health. That society creates the tension to say, man, I might have to go hungry for another hour or two. Because based on society standards, there's no food that I can put in my mouth, I can put in my body if I truly love myself based on my awareness. And remember, this is a journey. We're all on a journey, right? Man, 2 years ago, I was eating meat. I mean, a good steak, like to me on my birthday, this is my birthday month, right? This would have been a good time to go to Del Fresco's, to Mastro's, and I normally don't eat ribeyes because they're so fatty, but I would have had a ribeye because it's my birthday. And now here I am 2 years later with a different level of awareness saying, nah, that's not what I don't even have a desire to do that anymore, right? Because of my level of awareness in terms of what it means to love Linal. You get where I'm going?
Yeah. Okay. So I get so with the diet, I do get that with the diet and exercise, right? But then let's go and look at it in what society says as far as accomplishments. Okay.
I'm with you. I see where you're going. Go ahead.
You see what I'm saying? So if I want to just go to high school and get a job, right? And that's what I want to do. Whatever my hustle is whatever I find, I want to get a job. But then society say, you know what? You have to go get a master's now because right now a bachelor's degree don't even mean nothing.
Yeah, it's not good enough.
It's not good enough. Right?
Yeah.
So then, if I'm happy doing what I'm doing, right? And then society, you know, in order to live your best life, you have to become an entrepreneur. You have to invest in real estate. You have to do all these things, X, Y, Z, right? But then I don't even want to do those things, but society is putting this stress on me to accomplish all these things, and then I'm living and then I'm following the blueprint, and I'm looking
The blueprint of society, by the way, right?
The blueprint that society is telling me what I should be doing. I should be, you know, at this point during this time, I should be traveling to all these places. But the stress that the society puts on me to accomplish these things is actually killing me because it's stressful to even accomplish these things for some people.
No, I am in 100% agreement with you. And I would love for you to listen to the fourth show of the month, so the last Sunday of the month. Listen to that show when I talk about purpose and spirituality, because I'm gonna hit that hard. And if you have a comment, call in. I'm gonna hit that hard because one of the reasons we have that tension and stress in our lives is because one, we don't know ourselves, and loving yourself is knowing yourself and being fully aware as you can be in that moment. Because you and I, Chris, we have a level of awareness, but then next year this time if we have a conversation, that awareness may be more heightened than what it is now, right? Because the idea is growth. But my point is, many of us, because we are not aligned with our purpose, we're out in the world trying to do things and accomplish things that are not even in alignment with why we're here. I agree. I 100% agree. And society is telling you to go get that bachelor's, to go get that master's, to go into the corporate arena, make six figures, do all these things, and then when you accomplish it, you find that you're stressed, you're not happy, and you're wondering, what did I do wrong? And what you did wrong is you followed society standards versus gaining clarity on why God put you on the planet and living out your life's purpose. I completely agree.
Exactly. And then that actually, when you add that stress, right there, that actually intensifies the other stresses as far as eating incorrectly.
What?
Even if you
Yep.
think, right?
Yeah.
If you think, right, and you still have that stress, you still gonna have that eating incorrectly. That is gonna have a deleterious effect on your body. It's a big.
Yeah. And then it snowballs.
Yeah.
And then it snowballs. Chris, thank you for the phone call, man. Phenomenal phone call. Yeah. Great dialogue. Really appreciate that dialogue. And he hit it on the head. I mean, he really did. Self-love, true self-love is being so passionate about knowing yourself. Hey, Patrick, you listening? So passionate about knowing yourself that you're willing to do whatever it takes to understand your purpose and be in alignment with that purpose and not allow anything to get in the way. When I was in corporate America, at the beginning of 2015, I left at the end of 2015. And at the beginning of 2015, I ran a marathon with a friend of mine, not a full marathon, it was an 8K, okay? And I've been in shape for most of my life enough to run a 5K or 8K without really training, because that's a normal part of what running and all that's a normal part of what I do. And so he's like, hey man, this is my first time. Can you come out and support me? I said, absolutely. So I went out, ran with him, and I did exactly what I said I would do. I'm like, hey man, don't stop, let's go. There was one point where you started running fast, and I'm like, hey, slow down. We still, just because you saw this is the last mile, doesn't mean we don't want to go fast yet. You're going to run out of juice. This last mile is the hardest mile, right? And then sure enough, he slowed down. We got to, a quarter of a mile left. I'm like, let's go. Boom. And we finished. And everything seemed to be fine. And when I got home and I was getting out the car to the garage, I couldn't stand on my foot. Now, mind you, I said I train like this all the time, and I couldn't stand on my foot. And I went to a podiatrist. They said, well, you have plantar fasciitis. And I got on the phone with my coach that week, and I said, yeah, man, something's wrong with my foot. He said, well, there's a meaning. Everything that happens in your body, there's a meaning for it. And I said, well, what does that mean? And there's a book by Louise Hayes where she basically breaks down, she talks about your healing in the book, and she breaks down how different ailments in the body mean something in life. And when he looked up the foot, it said, you're not powerfully stepping forward in a place in your life where you know you should. And I knew that based on my purpose on the planet, it was time to leave that job. It was time to leave that job. And I was scared to leave the job because of how much money I was making, and I didn't know if I could make that money living my purpose. And my body, because of the tension in my body, I'm healthy, right? But my body is beginning to break down. Because of, I hope you guys are listening to me, because of the tension in my body, right, caused in my mind, knowing my purpose on the planet, and not necessarily living my purpose, like knowing what I'm supposed to do next. It was creating a tension in my body where just running an 8K, which was normal for me, my foot went out, right? And I started noticing my body was breaking down in areas where I never had my body break down before. Then I left, right? Fast forward to the end of 2015 when I left. When I left corporate America, I immediately dropped 10 pounds. Now, I've never been a fat guy, right? Right now, I'm about 186 pounds, 187 pounds. When I was in corporate America, and I was doing the same activities, right? When I was in corporate America, I was 195, 197. The weight I dropped was stress weight. And this is what I'm getting to in terms of self-love, okay? Self-love, many of us think I love myself. I love myself. Self-love is knowing yourself to the extent where you know your purpose, and you heard Caroline in the first caller, right? And doing whatever it takes to continually gain the knowledge I need to take care of myself holistically, like Dr. Terry Mason said in his call, right? Mentally, physically, and spiritually. That's self-love. That's self-love. And we're going to really dive into it in the second hour. And at the end, I'm going to share some strategies on how to really move yourself forward and gain more awareness when it comes time to take that assessment. Do I love myself? Do I love myself? So, all right, we're coming up on break. Top 10 causes of death in the U.S. Number 1, heart disease. Number 2, cancer. Number 3, chronic lower respiratory disease. Number 4, unintentional injuries. 5, stroke. 6, Alzheimer's disease. 7, diabetes. 8, influenza and pneumonia. 9, kidney disease. Rampant in our community. Number 10, suicide. All but one of these, accidents, all but one, accidents is the only one, is preventable and comes from a lack of self-love. Keep listening, because listening is life. I'll be right back. You're listening to Linal Harris. This is Inspirational Perspective, right here on WBON 1690 AM, the talk of Chicago. All right, so that's the first hour. That was phenomenal, man. So great phone calls. Here, let me turn down these commercials.
Murders. I'm Christopher Cruz. Two big wildfires burning in Northern California, north of San Francisco, have now merged. The fires have burned almost 200.
All right, there we go. All right. So remind me to turn everything back up. So phenomenal first segment. Dr. Terry Mason from the Doctors in the House that comes on at 10 a.m. on Sunday mornings, he called in. He was phenomenal. And by the way, he's a medical doctor. He's also a surgeon. And you heard what he said about food. All right? So this is not just something you get from the Divine Healing Hour or from me talking about food. This is medical doctor, right? And what I love about Dr. Terry Mason is he's evolved as a doctor. I wanted him to share a story about why he stopped doing certain surgeries, because he used to do surgeries on men who had erectile dysfunction, and he said after doing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these surgeries, he said he stopped. He couldn't do it anymore because each of these men, when he would tell them that what was happening for them was preventable, they'd be like, just do the surgery anyway, right? And they kept, and then later, he said that a year or two later, most of them were dead. So he would do these expensive surgeries, and then after he did his expensive surgeries, because what he said is erectile dysfunction is a symptom that's telling you something is wrong. He said, so the cool thing for men is if that happens, right, then you can say, uh-oh, something's wrong in my body. Right? And if you have an adequate amount of self-love, then you would say, I need to do something about that, right? Because there's awareness, obviously, right? You look down, it's not working. There's awareness, we all grown, right? We all grown. And there's awareness from that, which tells you that I need to love myself. I need to do something. And if you won't, we're all men. I'm a married man. If I won't stop my foolishness with my diet off that, then there's something else at play here, which is a lack of self-love. So, anyway, so Dr. Terry Mason, Caroline called in, talked about how her thesis was on, I just have to take it off. Her thesis was on, basically, taking a look at trauma and how trauma can be healed by self-love and self-care. So that's what she talked about, and then Chris, that was a phenomenal back and forth dialogue with him. So what we're going to cover next, one, I want to know if you guys have questions, if this is helpful. Again, it's my birthday month, and so I'm going through the 4 pillars of life. The first pillar is self-love, well-being, and health. when we come back, one of the things I'm going to be sharing are the 5 ways to discover yourself and separate yourself from the pack. And as you can you list the top 10 causes you mentioned? I can. Oh, can I list them here on the I think they might want me to list them here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You know what? The CDC, the causes that I just mentioned, Tina, if you go to the CDC's website, they're there. Now, Dr. Terry Mason shared with us that the British Medical Journal has a different list for the leading cause of death. And I was looking at that, but it's hard to host a show and look that up. But I'm gonna do more work on looking at the British Medical Journal and the leading causes of death there. But the only difference is number 3, the CDC doesn't call out medical errors, and the British Medical Journal does as number 3. Number 3 on the list that the CDC gives is here. Let me go back real quick. Is chronic lower respiratory disease. So, which comes from smoking and other things. Chronic lower respiratory disease. Chronic lower respiratory disease also comes from. It also can come from diet as well, not just smoking. But I mean, think about this. If you knew what you were putting into your mouth could lead to you having a stroke 20 years from now, and losing the ability to move one side of your body or think straight or speak straight, you would think that many of us would say, I'm not going to do that, right? But unfortunately, because we don't have the level of self-awareness and self-love that we should have, we continue with the same practices, right? And unfortunately, then we end up with these type of chronic diseases later. Alzheimer's disease. I'm gonna talk a little bit about that. I mean, but there's arsenic in our food that's eroding our brains. And we're caught in this loop where we're doing the same thing. We're not willing to do something different. Or a really good example of that is we're so stuck on how things taste, right? That don't taste good. I'm gonna tell you all day. White flour and sugar in a pastry or bread or anything like that is always going to taste better than a sprouted grain or something that's organic. Right, so I eat Ezekiel bread. Ezekiel bread is never going to be as good as Wonder Bread. Right, so if it was about how it tasted, then I'm going to eat Wonder Bread. But it's not about how it tastes. It's about what's loving to me, right? So some almond butter on Ezekiel bread does the job. And I actually enjoy it. Because going in, there's no tension. So, anyway, hopefully you all are getting this. Kenty said, it seems that this issue begins when we are very young. You're right. I'm thinking of the school breakfasts, lunch I ate from elementary on. A lack of self-love is cultivated in us very early. Yes, you are dead on. You are dead on. And the reason it's done is because you have to recognize that our government, as well as the big businesses that lobby our government, they see us as dollars from the very beginning. So they set us up to put us in this consumerism wheel very early on. And it's a wheel. A lot of people don't know that one of the biggest spenders on lobbying Congress is technology now. Now you say, why technology? Because a lot of technology companies are selling medical supplies to the doctors. So they're lobbying to keep some of these foods and things in place harder than the medical industry, because the more of us that are sick, the more doctors have to spend money on the technology, the more money they make. And so it's a loop. And we got to step out of it.
just because something doesn't feel good doesn't mean it's not self-love.
Mm-hmm. All right, we're back. You're listening to Inspirational Perspective. I'm your host, Linal Harris, your very own life coach, right here on WVON 1690 AM, the talk of Chicago. And the topic this morning is, what is self-love, and do you have it? And do you have it? And man, we've had a phenomenal conversation in the first hour. Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you, Patrick, for your contribution, Dr. Terry Mason, and the other phone callers. Talking about self-love and what you think. So I'm gonna start the hour off. I got Karen; she's on the line. Two things I want to do to start the hour off, because I asked you all, how do you love yourself, right? At the top of the show, before we define self-love. Okay, so I'm gonna ask you again. Right? Because part of my job as a coach is to drive awareness. So there are people who probably tuned in today who said, man, well, why are you talking about self-love? I love myself. I know I love myself. And now we spent an hour, we haven't even dived all the way in, but we spent an hour on self-love. And I'm curious what shifted for you all in that conversation in terms of how you feel like you love yourself. And then I want to read a comment that I got on Facebook Live. And then I'll take Karen. I see you there. We're going to take your phone call. But Emmanuel, what about you, man?
I think that self-love is doing the things that you know are good for you in the long run, even though they may not feel good in the present moment. You know what I mean? So,
before that hour, where are you on your self-love meter? Has it lowered a little bit? Like, man, maybe I don't love myself as much as I thought I did? Or no? It's okay. Either way.
No, I think I'm still at the same
place,
level.
Okay.
Honestly.
Okay. And this is not your first time hearing this conversation either. Yeah. Okay. All right. What about you, Patrick?
On a daily basis, I guess personal goals, but now from the answer earlier, where I'm at now is like I'm doing great because I guess I'm self-love, because I'm like, my own personal entrepreneur, doing what you really want to do.
Oh, so you're aligned with your purpose, and
I'm a DJ, so that's what
you
like
love.
In here now is
right
with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when we talked about again with self-discipline, and so I'm looking at myself like, no, I should really do 3 days a week in the gym, because like you said, it's going to be a future and betterment of myself. But like you said, you don't see it today, so that's the tough part.
Got it.
But my question is, with a lot of females, right?
Okay.
And I've dated females. You see, especially in social media today, you see all this, and it's funny. You go out a lot and you see all these girls focusing on the perfect body now, right?
Perfect body, yeah.
And on a perfect shape. And so my confusion is, when you see that, it's challenging their self-insecurities, would you say?
Yeah.
I know I've dated a girl that in the past, my ex, I used to throw away her diet pills, but like literally now, like she's just a health nut. You get what I'm saying? So it brought her self-love because she was having insecurities in herself.
Well, you know what? So I think you bring up a good point, Patrick, because you can't look at how a person looks on the outside and know whether or not they love themselves. Okay? It's a very, Dr. Mason said it best, is that this is an intrinsic conversation, right? We're talking about something that's external. Like, am I fully aware of myself, right? Is my physical body, my mind, and my spirit in alignment, right? Because, if I'm a young person, like right now, I'm not going to have this body right? There, 20 years from now, if I take off my shirt, I'm not going to look this way, right? But I can right now. But if I place my value on how I look, and that's part of how I love myself because of how I look, and not because of my purpose on the planet and what it is I know I'm supposed to do to help other people, then I could say I love myself right now, but it could be an erroneous type of love, because then as I begin to age, I struggle with my image. You get where I'm going? So this is why the self-love conversation is an intrinsic conversation around purpose. It's an internal conversation around, compassion, and do I love myself no matter what? Am I willing to accept? For instance, right? A lot of people are getting, augmentation surgeries, right? I say a lot of people, a lot of women. They're changing their lips. They're changing their breast. They're changing their gluteus maximus. I mean, some men are putting augmentations on their biceps because they want their arms to be bigger. And that's not the way God made you, right? But this imagery that we see on Instagram and in the media and in magazines and things like that will attack how you love yourself, right? Because God made you different. Like if, Emmanuel, all of us, we're fairly thin men, right? That has a lot to do with our DNA makeup. But if you had a problem with that, you find yourself always kind of like, oh man, I wish I was bigger. I wish I had bigger shoulders, bigger arms, etc. Or how do I maximize what God has given me now, right? How do I maximize that? And how do I make sure I'm healthy as I can be given my physical makeup, and in full alignment, mind, body, and soul? That's what self-love is, right? Because you and I may never be big muscle-bound men. Just not genetically possible, right? But that's not really what true strength is anyway. And a lot of those big guys ain't that strong. I know that because I can outlift them in the gym, right? So, but that's the point. Hopefully that answered your question, Patrick. Now here's the second thing. There was a comment on Facebook, Cantice, and she said, it seems that the issue is when we are very young. I'm thinking of school, breakfast, lunch that I ate from elementary on. And wow, what a lack of self-love is cultivated very early, right? On the break, we were talking about this, and I wanted to make sure I shared it with all of you all because that was on Facebook. Let me tell you, I say this all the time. You are at war. I've said that many times. You are at war. You are at war for your mind. You are at war for your body. And you are at war for your soul. If you don't believe that, then her comment was perfect, because even as a child, my wife and I, we're looking at daycares. One of the things they do, they have the menus. Some daycares are falling off the list because I love my son too much to let him eat that lunch that y'all gonna feed him. I love him too much. So if that means that we gotta we gotta pay more for a daycare that allows us to, influence the diet, then I'm willing to do that. Right? Because the level of knowledge that I have now, right? And the purpose that I have on the planet, we'll make a personal sacrifice as a family to ensure his long-term health. Now, why are we doing that? Well, when we asked about the diet in these daycares, Cantice, get this. They said, well, that's the recommended diet according to the American Health Association or something like that, right? We're not giving them anything that they say they cannot have. And so then we have to stop and say, all right, do they really care about us, right? This is not just a black conversation. This is a holistic conversation, because there are white people dying from these diseases. There are Hispanic people dying from these diseases. There are Asian people dying. Not as many Asians, though. Not as many, because of their diets, right? Because of their food, but not as many. And then, of course, there are black people who are dying from these diseases. And kidney disease was on the list. And you don't believe black people are dying from that? You just drive around your community and count how many DaVita dialysis organizations you can find. They're popping up like churches in the black community, right? Why? One is because of our knowledge, right? Two is because we've been indoctrinated this way from birth. And three is because when we do get the knowledge, we're so hooked on what they've given us. And it's not easy. It took me about 3 months to break away from meat. I mean, fully. Like, to break away from eating the chicken. And I said, I'm not going to eat it. And then I find myself in a drive-thru ordering some chicken nuggets saying this is the last time, right? But we talked about that in goals, where you have breakdowns. And so you had a breakdown. And then you address the breakdown. And you recommit and take action from that new commitment, right? That's how I broke the addiction that I had to meat. It was addiction. It really was, because I couldn't stop. I couldn't just up and stop. I had to put structures in place to stop. And many of us don't want to say we're addicted. We say, I like it. But that's why people shoot heroin, because they like the feeling. That's why people smoke crack, because they like the feeling. And they'll tell you, some of them will tell you straight out, I do drugs because I like it. And they're addicted, right? And a lot of us eat what we eat because we're addicted to it. All right, another phone call here. Karen, good morning. How are you?
Well, good morning, James. How are you doing today?
I'm well.
I think this is an absolute much-needed conversation. First of all, there's the universe, which the university is copied off of.
Mm-hmm.
And the universe has its associates, its bachelors, masters, and doctorates. Because in order to really love yourself, you must associate yourself with nature.
Right.
If you associate yourself with nature, you most of the time remain a bachelor to spend that time with nature. As you associate yourself by being a bachelor, you master any diseases that this world puts on you. Then you become the doctor of your own world. Because the Creator put us on this earth perfect. What perfect?
Yes, he did.
The thing is, as you begin to love yourself, we perfect any imperfections that we gain while we're here. So as long as we're walking on this earth, there will always be something to perfect. One time I used to smoke. I no longer smoke. I perfected it. One time I was a cheater. I no longer cheat. Now I'm walking to get the extra weight off of me. So that self-love is a life-going thing. We're always looking on the outside of what they can do or what that person can do. When the whole thing, when you begin to love yourself, you begin to constantly work on yourself, growing in perfection. We would read the word like we should. We were seeing that Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, everybody, Ruth, Esther, they were perfecting themselves because they became great in their own age. So self-love, right now, I love me more than I've ever loved me, because every day I'm finding out something new that I need to perfect in me. And as I begin perfecting it, guess what? My light shines, and others around see, and then they begin to perfect. And that's how self-love is to me. Awesome. I love your show. I normally don't get up early on Sunday, but I get up because I love your show, and I fell in love with your show when you and your wife was on there. Talking about how you all met. And how she spoke about allowing a man to do the chasing. What we don't know is that you kings are natural-born hunters and things.
That's right. That's right.
We queens have a certain thing that you all love to chase.
That's right.
So you know what's up? You keep doing what you're doing. The list Look in the mirror, and anything that you don't like in yourself, fix it. That's all we gotta do. Hey, I love you. You have a wonderful day. Making love begins when you start thinking.
Amen.
Keep up this work. Love you, Kate.
All right. Thank you so much, Karen. Great phone call. All right. Well, if you just tuned in, we're talking about one of the 4 pillars of life, which is self-love. And the question is, what is self-love? And do you have it? Do you have it? So we started top of the show talking about how nearly 75% of all deaths happen. I ran through that list: heart disease, cancer, chronic lower respiratory disease, accidents, stroke, Alzheimer's, diabetes, influenza, and pneumonia is number 8. Number 9 is kidney disease. And number 10 is suicide, which is a definite lack of self-love, right? You can say it's mental illness, whatever it is. Hey, guess what research says? They were talking about it on the hour before, Divine Healing Hour, right? Food changes your mood, changes how you feel about yourself, right? So it's not just about mental clarity and health, it's also about mood. And a lot of people who struggle with this illness of suicide or suicidal thoughts, oftentimes it's the chemical imbalance is also coming from the food. All right, okay. The top 3 can prevent it through our inputs, right? And if we investigate our inputs, so we're talking about self-love. If I love myself, then that means that I'm willing to, I'm thoughtful, and I'm in some ways very intentional about what my inputs are. Okay. I'll tell you something. And this is a very personal journey. I remember when I used to feel righteous because I didn't eat beef. Right? I'm like, so the first thing I cut was beef. And then I felt righteous. I don't eat red meat. But I was still eating chicken and a lot of other poultry. And then when I was doing research around self-love and for health and well-being, I found out that this chicken we're eating now, like this new chicken, and the reason I say this new chicken is because if you're eating a chicken that was vegetarian fed on a farm, all that, this is not true, okay? But fact of the matter is, that's really hard to find, even outside the country. Because outside the country, when I'm outside the country, sometimes I'm like, I might be able to have some chicken. Because, by the way, the reason I don't eat chicken is because, in my opinion, American chicken is poisoned, all right? So, meat in moderation, it might be fine. I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, you got some vegans and all that. I'm not that guy. The reason I don't eat meat is because most meat in America has poison in it. And I don't want to poison my body because of the level of self-love I have, all right? But in the research, I found that chicken actually has more cholesterol in it than beef. And part of the reason for that is because, and you don't believe me, Google it, all right? But part of the reason for that is because of all of the chemicals and hormones and things that they're feeding chicken. And a lot of these chickens aren't running around, they're super fat now. They're being grown and cultured in these tight spaces, etc. Just not healthy. And processed food. The World Health Organization has classified cured and processed meats, that's including bacon, salami, sausage, ham, as group 1 carcinogens because there is a causal link between consuming these meats and bowel cancer. All right, so a number 1 carcinogen, group 1 carcinogen. So I was sharing with one of the hosts last Sunday, and they were talking about, he was talking about how, I don't eat this, I don't eat that. I said, well, you eat chicken? He's like, yeah. And I was like, if you have barbecue chicken, that's like smoking, like when I say barbecue chicken, a chicken on a grill, okay? That's like, that piece of chicken is like smoking 3 cigarettes. And he looked at me like, oh. Because some of us, we're righteous, right? Oh, I don't smoke cigars. I don't smoke cigarettes, but then we'll eat a piece of chicken off the grill. This is so good, not even realizing that it's a group 1 carcinogen. You just smoked 3 cigarettes in terms of carcinogens that you're ingesting. But we don't know these things, right? Many of us don't know that there's arsenic in our rice, our wheat, our bread, our fruit juice. We don't know that. And so we continue to do the things that we do. And when we do know, that's part of what my job is, right? To inform us. Don't hate me. Don't turn me off. But it's to inform us, right? So then that way, we can begin from a level of awareness, making different choices. Top 3 cancers: lung cancer, prostate cancer, colon and rectum cancer, right? All come from inputs. Lung cancer, prostate cancer, colon and rectum cancer, all come from inputs. So the question becomes, do you really love yourself? Now here's the thing. Emmanuel, if a woman or, someone came to you and said, I love you, and it's not in their actions, would you believe it just because they say it?
No, I wouldn't.
So, can you see why if I share this level of awareness and then somebody comes to me and says, but Linal, I do love myself. I'm like, right? Because if my wife told me she loved me, but she wasn't but she wasn't loving towards me, I wouldn't believe it, right? The same way that if I tell you I love myself, but I'm constantly tearing my body down, I'm not taking care of myself, you wouldn't believe me. It's no different. So the question becomes for all of us, like, how are we loving ourselves? And this is the beginning. There are many people who can't powerfully step into their purpose. There are many people who can't do the things that they really want to do because they don't have the mental clarity to do it, right? They're like, I'm so tired. I'm so exhausted. And the reason they don't have the mental clarity to do it has a lot to do with the self-love. If you were loving yourself, then you would be able to move yourself forward. My wife just joined. Hey, babe. On Facebook. But you'd be able to, you'd be able to do the things that you're supposed to do. Many of us cannot fulfill our purpose on the planet because we're not properly loving ourselves. And when God put us here, you heard Karen say it in her phone call, He put us here perfect. So He put the seed of greatness in us. He gave us a purpose. He put us here perfect. And then we see what the purpose is, right? Maybe you've done the purpose course on murdermediocrity.com. Maybe you've come to one of the workshops. But and now you have your purpose, and you're like, well, Linal, I'm still having a hard time living my purpose. I don't know how to live my purpose. I don't have the energy to do the work that I'm supposed to do aligned with my purpose. And part of the reason why you don't know how or you don't have the energy is because you're not loving yourself properly. And if you start to love yourself properly, your energy level will spike. Your mental clarity would spike. All those things will happen. What's your question, Pat?
If your self-love is following a purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you already every day are doing things that's not in that, but you call yourself, would you say, like settling, but it makes your life comfortable. How do you defeat self-love versus comfortability?
Ooh, hey man, the comfort zone is the number one level of resistance that we face. Our comfort zones. And we have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Do you think it's comfortable to walk through a store and not be able to find bread that my family eats and have to go drive somewhere else to get to Trader Joe's or something like that to get the bread? Is that comfort? Is that convenient? No, right? So when it comes to comfort, we have to be willing to eliminate our comfort for our commitments. Let me say that again. We have to get to a point where our commitments trump our comfort. So you have a commitment to being one of the best DJs on the planet, right? Yeah, he's shaking his head yes. Okay. Then if in order to do that, that requires a different level of energy and mental clarity, what are you willing to do that's uncomfortable, right? To really hone in on that commitment. You get where I'm going? Yeah, he's shaking, he's smiling.
Like late nights, early mornings.
Yeah. But that's a part of being a DJ, right?
Yes.
So then, if you're having late nights, early mornings, then there's probably a level of exercise and diet that if you really want to love yourself based on your purpose and passion, that you should be taking on. Would you agree?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And are you always doing that?
Yes and no.
Yes and no, right? And part of the reason why you're not always doing it is because it's not easy, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And also, like, you find yourself trying to, you call it rest, right? So you're trying to find your comfortability and rest and, like, still going with your commitments.
Right.
But that's where you settling at, right?
Likely, but part of it is being intentional. What I mean by intentional is there's likely times when you should be resting when you're not. Yeah? Tell me if I'm wrong.
Go ahead and explain a bit.
Nah, it's a simple question. There are likely times when you should be resting when you're not resting.
Yes and no.
Yes and no. Yeah, I like him, right? Yes and no, man. Is that true?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somewhat, but it's not all the time.
Yeah, I get that it's not all. Hey, man, there's times when I should be resting when I'm not resting too.
But I guess resting for me would be more physical, like laying down.
Yeah.
Versus like mental rest.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like just actually going to sleep, like laying down and going to sleep. I know I got a gig, a DJ gig from 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. I should be asleep right now, right? That would be self-love. You get where I'm going?
I mean, yeah, it's all example, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah. It's an example. But here's the thing. Hey, none of us are perfect. None of us. All of us have. And what I'm driving here is we have to put our commitment has to trump comfort. And sometimes it's, man, I'm there. I stayed up too late Thursday night. Way too late. And I know that I play basketball at 5:30 a.m. And so I've been suffering all weekend because of it. Right? It was a lack of self-love. We're all in this game. And I did, but I'm aware of it, right? And I even said, Linal, you got to recommit to sleep. You got to recommit. I already had the mental conversation. Like going into this next week, that's not happening. No more. And guess what? 6 months from now, it might happen again. And what I'm going to do? Have the same conversation, get back on. But that's what this self-love thing is all about. My wife said possibility lives outside our comfort zone. So that possibility of being the world's best DJ lives outside your comfort zone, brother. Right? You know, the possibilities that I have for my life live outside my comfort zone. Same thing for you, man. Right? And many of us aren't hitting our possibilities because we're too attached to our comfort. So let me read to you real quick the definition of love. An intense feeling of deep affection. An intense feeling of deep affection. And that's a noun, it's a state of being. So then you have to ask yourself, do I have an intense feeling of deep affection for myself? And do I accept who I am fully to the point where I have a deep affection for me? Now, why is that important? It's important because one of the things that many of us struggle with is self-acceptance, right? A lot of people have image issues, all these different things. And so we can't accept ourselves. I'm headed to Vegas for a conference, and at this conference, I forget his name. He's one of the speakers, but he doesn't have legs, he doesn't have arms. You know his name?
I don't remember.
You don't?
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah,
but I don't
he
remember
doesn't have
his
legs,
name.
he doesn't have arms. But he has made a tremendous impact on this planet. And I believe he was born that way. And he's been able to make a tremendous impact because he started with self-love, self-acceptance. And then now, through self-acceptance, he's been able to live out his purpose and transform people's lives all over the world, right? With his message. He's a powerful message. But he accepts himself. He accepts himself. He accepts himself just the way he is, and he'll get up on stage and make jokes, all types of things. But you can tell, like, in terms of self-love, there's a healthy level of self-love.
Nick Vujicic.
Yes, Nick Vujicic. Self-love. He would, if he couldn't accept his circumstance, right? He couldn't accept the fact that he doesn't have any limbs. He would not be as great as he is. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. If he allowed that to stop him. Some of us, we do have physical impediments. Have you gotten to a place of acceptance? Are you willing to allow your acceptance of yourself to open up your awareness? Because acceptance opens awareness, right? I'm aware of myself because I'm willing to accept my imperfection as a human being, right? In a conversation with Patrick, I can call myself out because I've accepted my humanity. I've accepted it. In no way would I ever try to get on these airwaves and try to fool you into thinking that I'm perfect, into thinking that I don't make mistakes, into thinking that I don't have breakdowns, into thinking that the very message that I'm sharing with you, I don't have my own struggles with, right? This is not me sharing from a place of I've achieved I'm on the mountaintop and I've achieved the top levels and you should follow. No. This is simply a message of awareness and a reminder for me that there's a level of awareness that I can reach. In our lives, in order to transform, awareness is key. Awareness is the key. If I am unwilling to be aware, if I am unwilling to look at myself and accept who I am, right? Because many of us, we don't accept it. So what happens is, because I can't accept that I'm not perfect, then I can't even be with my breakdowns. I avoid the very thought of it. Somebody reflects something to me and says, Linal, you can do better there. If I don't have a healthy level of self-acceptance, I can't hear them. I can't hear what they're saying. I can't hear the feedback. Why? Because in order for me to hear the feedback coming at me that's saying, hey, there's another level, you're imperfect. If I haven't accepted my imperfection, then I can't be with the feedback. As a matter of fact, I'm going to reject it. So in this talk of self-love, self-acceptance is key. Are you willing to accept yourself the way you are? Are you willing to love yourself the way you are? And when you become willing to accept yourself, you become willing to love yourself. That's what opens up the door to a different level of awareness. And then get this. When you can accept yourself, when you can love yourself, it also opens up the door to love someone else adequately in relationship. Let me tell you, relationships are interesting, man. You know, and there's so many aspects of a relationship that you cannot control. That if you don't love yourself and you can't fully love someone else with all the things that the relationship will throw at you, you'll be in trouble. Now, this is one of the reasons I believe we have such a high divorce rate. Is because people are getting in relationship with someone, they don't accept themselves already. They don't love themselves already. And so then they look for signs of where I'm not accepted or where I may not be loved all over the place. Or they just don't know what it is to love and accept someone else because they haven't done it for themselves. Do you love yourself? So what is self-love, and do you have it? So now I want to cover the 5 ways to discover yourself. All right? Because we're talking about self-awareness, self-acceptance, self-awareness, etc. And there are 5 ways that you can begin really truly discovering yourself. Because here's the thing. If you don't have awareness, then you won't be connected to who you really are. I've had people tell me, Linal, you don't understand. I don't have any talents. There's not anything that I'm just really good at. And all that tells me is you just don't know yourself. Because you were put on the planet to be great. And so if you don't know your talents, it's because you haven't taken the time to really get in relationship with yourself. So let me give you a couple of tips and ways to do this. Because somebody might have been listening for the last hour, 45 minutes. And they've been saying to themselves, man, Linal, I get it. But what now? What do I do? Well, first is, if you can't describe yourself, if you can't identify characteristics that make you up, that you're good at, that you are talented at, then who are some family and friends that you can trust? People that you can go to and you can ask them a question like, what 3 characteristics or words would you say best describe me? Right? And when you get the answer, be willing to accept it. See, because what happens is when we don't have a love for ourselves, if somebody says, if you ask me that question, Emmanuel, and I said, well, Emmanuel, you show up as like a man of integrity to me, but you can't accept yourself, you can't accept that, right? And then you'll be like, no, Linal, I mean, I do a lot of things that are outside of integrity and blah, blah, blah. Like, this is a characteristic that you exude. So instead of looking for ways that you may not, on a personal level, right? Because when it comes to integrity, we all have integrity issues, let me tell you, right? Instead of getting crowded out with that, looking at, well, what do you mean by that, Linal? And looking for ways to accept it, right? So when you hear it, don't knock it down. Accept it. And allow it to become a part of your awareness practice over the next week. All right? The second thing I want you to do, and write that one down in the notes, right, is number 1, ask 5 family members or friends, how would they best describe you? All right? Emmanuel's putting that in the notes for the Facebook listeners. The second one is, get clear about what you fear. One of the reasons many of us don't truly know ourselves, right? Because, to know yourself is to love yourself. All right? One of the reasons many of us don't know ourselves, especially men, is because we don't know our fears. When I coach men, often when they stop because they're afraid. So they're taking on a new goal, new activity, and they stop. What we distinguish is that they're afraid. But the amount of work that I have to do to convince them that there's fear there, right? And how I convince them is just by asking them multiple questions different ways. There's a lot of work. And the reason there's a lot of work is because they're unwilling to accept that as a man, they have fears. As a man, you can be hurt. And most of us, I even see it in myself. If my wife hurts my feelings, my initial reaction is anger. Because I don't know how to be, I have to practice being hurt, opening up to her and saying, you hurt my feelings, right? Instead of coming with anger. But it's because we're just not in relationship with ourselves. We men are not in relationship with ourselves the way that we should be. Or the way that we could be. So get clear on your fears. And make a list of the things that you fear most. Why? Because this is a part of who you are. Every human being on the planet has fear. Okay? The soldier that displays a high level of courage has fear. They're just being a soldier afraid. They're doing it afraid. They're charging, moving forward, afraid. And one of the reasons they can do that is because they've already accepted the fact that they're afraid. I'm afraid to do this. However, my commitment is to move forward. So I'm going to move forward afraid. Understanding what the fear is. The reason I'm able to do some of the things I do is because I know I'm afraid of it. And so I'm like, man, this scares you. And so instead of stopping, let's just do it while your heart's pounding and while you're sweating profusely. That's it. Number 3, on the path to building a better relationship with yourself. Visualize the life of your dreams. So as a coach, one of the 2 questions I ask anyone who's looking to create a shift in their lives are, what are your dreams and what do you see as possible? And it's astonishing how many people have never really given these 2 questions a lot of thought. Like, what are your life's dreams? Many of us are so caught up in it's not possible or it won't happen for me that that's what's disconnecting us to ourselves. You have a seed of greatness. How do you activate that seed? How do you really get in relationship with yourself? Is figuring out what that seed is there for, which is your dreams. Richard Bach has a quote where he says, no man is given an idea that he cannot execute on. So the fact that you can dream it means that you can do it. I was reading an article the other day about the likelihood that Kanye West is a billionaire now, right? And this happened through the Yeezys, the Adidas. So the Adidas line with Yeezy is worth, as they say, about $1.5 billion. Wow. Okay. And so as a result, that increased his net worth. And then that makes me think about who Kanye was and the things that he's declared into his life and the dreams he had. And you might not like Kanye, but there's something at play there, right? There's definitely a map that he's drawn that we can follow in terms of dreaming and declaring things and then going out and doing it. The man said that he had mad fashion skills. He said it. He said people will love what I create before he ever got involved with the fashion line, Adidas or whomever else. He said it. We were like, man, stay in your lane. You're a rapper. But he had a dream. And following that dream has likely placed him at an income level that rap would have never done. What are your dreams? It doesn't matter if it's outside the box of what you're doing today. All that matters is it's your dream. And this is part of what it means to connect to ourselves, to love ourselves, to actually accept that I can live my dream. Think about that. If I told my wife I had a dream and she was like, you can't do that, you won't ever do that, and I told you all that, you would likely accuse her of not loving me. Like, man, that's not a loving thing to do, to tell her husband he can't do that. So, but we do it to ourselves all the time. Oh, I can't do that. That's not possible for me. We do it to ourselves all the time. So, visualize the life of your dreams, because that's a part of loving yourself. Number 4, question yourself. Question yourself. Yes, loving yourself is questioning yourself. Okay? And the questions here, they can be simple. Questions like, why do I work in the job I'm in? Like, why do I really have this job? Is it because it's aligned with my purpose, or is it because I have to pay bills? Why do I spend my weekends the way I spend my weekends? You know, typically I spend my weekends with my family, with my son. I know why I spend my weekends that way. I'm very satisfied spending my weekends that way, right? Why do you spend the weekends the way you do? This is a part of who you are, right? Are you doing things that you love, or are you caught up in the tradition of the society that we live in? We talked about that. Here's another question. Am I easily influenced? If so, why? Because here's the thing. When I don't accept myself, then I'm willing to accept anyone else's plan for me. So if I'm easily influenced, then that's an indication of a lack of self-love. If somebody can just walk up to me and influence me to do something that I'm not committed to, that means I don't love myself. Period. You know, man, Linal, this burger is phenomenal. Eat it. No, I'm not committed to. I don't eat that type of meat. Sorry, that's not what I do. Come on, man, it's good. No, right? That's not even a struggle for me. Why? Because I'm connected to my commitments because I'm fully self-aware. The self-awareness comes from a healthy level of self-love. Here's another question. What gets me really excited? Like what am I passionate about? What really gets me going? And of those things, how many of those things do I take on as much as I can? Because if I love myself, then I'm going to say, man, this is what I want to do. This is what makes me feel good. This is what I'm good at. This is what excites me. And I want to live my life doing work that excites me. Last night, man, right now, I got a bad toothache. Told my wife, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make the show tomorrow. And then I laid down. I said a prayer. I said, it's my commitment to be there. So if I'm supposed to be there, well, because, if you can't talk, because, I woke up this morning, my mouth felt a lot better. You can call it healing. You can call it whatever it is. But even though it's not 100%, I'm excited to show up at 7 o'clock every morning. I'm excited. I'm excited to talk about these things because it's part of my life's purpose. So despite what may be happening for me behind the scenes, I can do my work because I relate to my work as exciting. So what excites you? Do you know? And then another one is, what kind of information interests you most? I mean, I opened up the article not because I cared about Kanye being a billionaire, but because I was curious about how we got there, right? And then when I saw it was fashion, I was like, oh, wow, right? That interests me. Not the fashion part, but his journey, his purpose, how it's all aligned, how he pursued that passion, even though people told him it was nuts, that he needs to stay in his lane. So then I'm reading the article thinking like, wow, okay, this is interesting. This is good, right? That's interesting to me. Watching people accomplish their dreams, live their dreams. I'm interested in coaching because I get to help people live their dreams. That's exciting for me. That's interesting for me. The only way I found that out is, though, through doing a query about who Linal is. Last but not least, this is the last thing of the 5. No, start keeping a journal. Start writing down your experiences. Now, each day we live brings with it an elaborate tale of love, success, failure, disappointment, you name it. And far too often, we live out our days without truly understanding and identifying our wins and our losses. What's today, a winning day? And I will, Sean. He said, please go to the dentist. I will. It's part of self-love to go to the dentist, right? But are we articulating our losses? As a matter of fact, to that point, we've got to close the show. But I should have called the dentist on Wednesday, right? Self-love. I'm in the conversation too. I should have. And then on the weekend, I'm like, man, I got to wait till Monday now. But when I should have called on Wednesday when it first started. Self-love, right? Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. I wish I came up with that, but that's Aristotle. So let me know how I can support you in your journey of self-discovery. My purpose is your success. Your success is linked to your purpose on the planet. And so as always, thank you all for listening, and continue to ask yourself this question of what is self-love, and do I have it? Am I displaying the level of love for myself in all the areas of my life that I should? You've been listening to Inspirational Perspective. I'm your host, Linal Harris. Thank you guys so much for listening. Be sure to tune in again next week, 7 a.m. We're talking relationships. Call your girlfriends, call your boyfriends, call whomever, your wife, your husband, because we'll be talking relationships right here on WVON 1690 AM, the talk of Chicago. Have a blessed day, everybody.